welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So I was having a little drink, trying to figure out what to do for this episode, when I had a little daydream. Nay, a vision! So come along on this little word journey with me. Let's say you and your fellow adventurers, you're sitting by the campfire, you've had a long day of, I don't know, fighting orcs or something. Anyways, you're miles away from civilization and any comforts of home, and then you hear something rustling out in the woods. You arm yourself when through the trees comes a strange man with a backpack. A strange man who makes a strange request. He says if you let him share your fire and your food, he will let you into his tavern. You of course are confused because you're miles away from civilization, but you accept. You watch as he takes his bag off of his back, opens it up, and out comes an entire tavern. There's drinks, there's games, there's a serving wench. Is it realistic? Absolutely not. Are we gonna make it happen today? Yes. Yes, we are. So that's today's adventure. We're gonna try to figure out how to fit an entire tavern into a backpack. So stick around and see if this is possible as we level up this skill. All right, so to lay some groundwork, I want this thing to be small enough so that, again, you could wear it or you can carry it around easily, but able to accommodate most bottles of whatever you'd want. Of course, I mean, as long as it's whiskey. What are we, heathens? Now, of course, you can put anything you want in there, but, you know, why would you? Whiskey's just better. I'm getting broaden your horizons, of course, but I do really love whiskey, so much so that I've kind of always contemplated, like, making my own. And with today's sponsor, Skillshare, I can do just that. Come on, that was a good segue, right? Seriously though, I found this really awesome class called Full Beginner's Guide to Home Whiskey Brewing by Vlastis David. It shows all the ins and outs of making your own whiskey at home, teaching you everything from making a mash to using a pot still, and how to choose the right bits that come out of that so you don't like kill yourself. Apparently the first 10% that comes out is straight up poison. But seriously, if you've ever been interested in this like me, it's a really cool class. And don't worry if brewing spirits isn't your cup of tea. Skillshare has a huge variety of classes covering everything from photography, to video editing, to building your own business. In fact, if my whiskey project comes out amazing, maybe I'll actually start my own business. And then I could use the class Build Your Business and Brand, Translating Your Passion into a Plan by Rebecca Minkoff, just to get my whiskey empire off the ground. Now, if you're interested in this skill like I am, or just learning anything new, you're in luck. Because the first 1,000 people to click on the link below will get 1 month free trial of Skillshare. Not only do I actually believe in this product, I do use Skillshare quite a lot, and I honestly do think you'll find something you like there. Every sign up for that trial helps out the channel. It's a win-win. You get to learn something new for free, and you get to give us a hand. So click on that link and learn something new today. Now, to actually make this thing, I decided there needed to be some sort of a rigid frame for this. I was gonna build some little boxes for it, but then I went to my local liquor store and I was like, hey, do you have any of those boxes that bottles of wine or whatever show up in? And they did! They gave me this thing. Turns out if you just ask for it, they'll give them to you. They just throw them away. Who knew? So I started laying this thing out just to kind of visualize how it might look. Putting some bottles inside of there along with some glasses, a jaunty little flask. Basically just as much as I can kind of fit in this space to see how it should lay out. Now, I'm gonna want this to open up so there's 2 sides to it, so I will end up cutting it in half. So to figure out exactly how much space I can get away with, I first lay a ruler down across the tallest things, in this case the glass, so that I have a flat surface to make a mark with. Then using that as a jumping off point, I just went up a little bit to give myself some extra space and measured how far that would be from the very top of that lip. So my vision here is to have one side of it be where all the drinking stuff is, and the other side of it be kind of like a game station. So you can have your drinks and your pub games. Maybe I'll figure out a way to make a little bar or something. I don't know, we'll have fun with it. Anyways, by taking that measurement from the top, I can now go to the outside of the box and make my mark all the way around it on each side. Using those marks, I can take a straight edge and continue a line all the way around so I know where to cut. Alright, so a box is rigid because not only does it have the sides nailed together or whatever, but it also has those bottom plates to help hold it square. I really didn't want to go cutting this thing in half and having one side kind of rack itself as I did. So with that in mind, I laid it down into some 1/4-inch plywood and traced around the box. Then I went back in with my jigsaw and cut that panel out. To help make sure it was secure, I first hit the whole rim of the box with some wood glue, and then carefully positioned that wooden panel into place. I locked it into place, using some of these small nails here, spaced out to be about every 6 inches. Finally, I just rounded out all those edges with my sander, just to make sure everything looked clean and tidy, and also because I'm going to be moving around with this thing. Any like really hard, sharp edges are easier to chip off. So by rounding them out, it's going to add a little bit of extra durability to this thing. Okay, so now to cut this thing in half. First, I started with a handsaw in the corner, just to give me a good starting off point. This allows me to slide my jigsaw blade right in there and start making my way around the box. I just followed my line all the way around until the thing broke apart into 2 pieces. Now, although there is like a bright side to me getting this free box from a liquor store, it is completely made out of pine. Which on one hand is nice because it'll be lighter if I'm going to be adding all this stuff to it. I really don't want like a heavy material. But on the other hand, it is a really soft wood, and I don't trust it all the way with just some nails around the corners. So to help mitigate that and give myself a little bit more surface area where that connection is made, I just bought some of this trim molding here. I measured it against the box and made my mark, and then just cut it with my chop saw. Next, I covered both of the flat edges of that with some Titebond glue, then secured them into place on the corners, locking them in temporarily with some staples. I just repeated this for every long corner. Basically, that kind of L shape that thing has gives me enough surface area to add more glue to it and make that entire corner connection just a little bit stronger. Okay, if you all saw my coffee alchemy kit here, you know in order to get stuff to like stay inside of a wooden box, I like to use a piece of leather that I make all of my connections to, and then I glue that to the box. I'm gonna do the same thing for this project because it works really well. Especially if wood, like I said, this soft or this thin, because if I was putting just like a bunch of screws in it or whatever, they'd punch out to the other side or they'd like pull off. Using the big sticky surface area of the leather and the glue is just gonna make a stronger bond as far as I'm concerned. Though I didn't think that the inside area that was like left flat there was gonna be absolutely perfect. So in order to make the measurements as perfect as I can get it, I went ahead and just took some of this newsprint paper and shoved it down into the box. Then just traced along the edges. Once I pull it out, it has an exact imprint of what that space looks like. I just used those to cut out these pieces of 4-ounce leather. And I'm actually really glad I did it that way because they were different. Like both sides were just slightly different, just kind of cocked a little bit differently. So if I made them both exactly the same, it just wouldn't have fit as tightly. In fact, I had to go ahead and mark these things with a Sharpie to say which box they belonged in and in which orientation. All right, cool. So now that we have that like leather backing, we have to really figure out what's gonna go inside of these boxes, in what orientation, and then make our marks so that we can make our connection points. So I started with the liquor side of it, again positioning some bottles, some little shot glasses, that flask, and then some tumblers. I also threw in a little bottle opener / corkscrew, which by the way is it's super clutch. I can't tell you how many times I've been camping or just like out in the world, and man, did I need a corkscrew. Honestly, almost every time Maddie and I travel, we have to buy a corkscrew because we just don't have one. Now to help keep those glasses in place and to give those bottles a little shelf to sit on, I just cut this little piece of 4-inch strapping to fit exactly in this space. Then I cut some other pieces of the same wood, the same size of the glasses, to help space them apart. This will not only help keep them in place, but it's gonna stop them from clanging together and like breaking when I'm on the road. Okay, for the other side where the games are gonna live, I first started with these 2 little cups that are full of just a boatload of dice. There's so many great games you can play with dice, and if you have cups, you can go ahead and play Liar's Dice. Like this whole little kit already has a bunch of games with it. To this, I did the exact same thing, putting the wood in to lock in those cups. Now I also have this game pouch that I made in this episode right here. That's holding more dice, knuckle bones, little game board pieces, and that bag opens up to be a game board by itself. This I figured I could just shove into this little space right here. Next, I positioned my Royal Game of board that I made, which just so happens to nest these 2 sets of playing cards perfectly. And since I'm including playing cards, like a lot of times I'll go out to play and people don't know the rules of like poker, so I figured it'd be fun to add the rules as well as the hand hierarchy right to this board. Now in order to make sure that game board didn't work its way down as I walked, I actually cut this little piece of that trim molding just to give it something to help support it. Then for just a finishing touch, I figured it'd be fun to have like a notebook and some pencils put into place, just so you can keep score on whatever game you're playing. And that right there looks like a pretty nice little kit. Like just off the top of your head, there's a whole bunch of games you could play with just the cards alone. Okay, so happy with that, I now have to figure out a way to actually lock all this stuff into place. So to aid me in this, I cut a whole bunch of these half-inch strips of leather. I also busted out some buckles to help lock stuff in, as well as these little screw-in Sam Brown buttons. The thought being anything that's going to fluctuate in size, like the bottles, like you're going to have different bottles, I'll make that adjustable. Whereas the things that are going to be standard, like locking in those little glasses and stuff, that's going to be the same size no matter what. So those could just be buttons. Cool, so with everything laid out, I went around with my pencil and just marked where I thought all of these straps will go, making really light marks on the leather just to show myself where all of the bottles and game boards and cups and everything land on that piece of leather. This way, when I take it back out, I have a little road map to tell myself exactly like where straps can sit. Then I just went about making the actual straps, like this one here that I made for the bottle. You know, just figuring out how long they need to be, actually adding the hardware to it. Now, if you're super new to leather and you're like, well, how do I make the straps? I've covered it a bunch of times in the past. Check out this playlist here. It's basically everything I've done with leather so far. And as you can see on the gaming side here, I figured out where all of these strips will go to help hold everything in place and how they're gonna wrap around each piece. Same with the drinking side, starting with seeing how those cups will lock into place. And then for the bottles, I figured that because it would need to be adjusted and I want that buckle to be able to fall wherever I need it, I would just put in these two little strips here that strap will actually fish through. This way it can adjust around as much as it needs to. And for those little shot glasses, I'm just making a loop of leather so that it's big enough for it to slide into, but then as that cup kind of tapers up, it'll get stuck inside of that loop. Now, I had a lot of trouble figuring out how I wanted to connect that flask because there's no really good spot to connect it to. So I figured that I'd actually just wrap this sucker in some leather too. All I had to do was cut a piece so that it was just about 1/8 of an inch too short. Then I used my wing divider to make equal lines on either side of that opening. Then punched my sewing holes all along that line. So here's the thought. So you do it just a little bit smaller because then once you wet the leather, it'll actually stretch enough so that those ends touch. Then as it dries, that leather's gonna shrink again and become really tight around the thing that you just wrapped. Now to help hold this in place, I actually punched 2 holes in the front of that thing so that another one of these little strips can attach to the front. This way a strap can go right through that, locking it into place. With all of my straps and strips and whatever figured out, it took a little bit to do, I'm not gonna lie. From there though, all I had to do was go around and punch all of the holes so they lined up with all the pieces that needed to go into those places. Now, before I put it all together, I wanted to go ahead and get it all dyed up so there'd be no little spaces that I was missing. To do this, I just used a spray bottle and some water-based dye. Check out this playlist here though if you want to see a bunch of other dyeing methods though. Once that was evenly covered, I moved on to the box, applying a nice walnut stain to the whole thing. Then I hit the inside of that box with some polyurethane. I say I only hit the inside of the box because the original thought was that I was going to have that finish on the outside, right? It was gonna look kind of cool, that darker color. But then I had another thought and I couldn't shake it. You'll see it in a few minutes, but I made a choice. Anywho, once the dye of the leather was dry, I went back in with some Atom Wax just to help protect it and give it a little bit of a shine. Then I went ahead with some rapid rivets and just locked all of my straps into place. And check out how good this works. Look at it holding all the cards and the game board and everything in place. The little buttons work perfectly and everything just fits so snug. Oh my god, I was so proud of that. Look how cute the little pencils in the notebook is. I love it. So cool. Though I shouldn't pat myself too hard, because I did kind of mess up when it came to the flask. Like I said, I needed to wet that leather down so that it could stretch, but I had already sealed the front of it. So as that water leaks through to the other side, there isn't a real way for it to dissipate and dry after it's all put together. It's not a big deal, it's just gonna leave some water stains. I'm not that upset about it, but I'm a little upset about it, it was dumb. Anyways, to hold that together, I just use a basic baseball stitch, which does a great job bringing those ends flush and holding everything nice and strong. And look at how dope this side looks. Everything has its place. It's all held on snug. And that was right after I did the flask. It does dry out more than that, but still, this drives me a little crazy. Okay, so now that I know that everything fits and I like the layout a lot, it's time to actually stick this thing into place. To do this, all I had to do was add some contact adhesive to the inside of the box, as well as to the back of my leather panels. Then after they get tacky, I just carefully position them into place, pushing down to make sure the bond is nice and secure. This is a really tight fit, so I had to bring my fingers all around the outside just to make sure everything pushed down snug. But in the end, it looked so good. Okay, so order of operations. Now that we have the leather in place, we can put all the little wooden shelving in place too. To do this, I just positioned that little shelf where it would go, and then used some nails through the sides to hold it into place. Then once that was in place, I nailed down through the top to hold the little walls in place too. And with that, we got fancy little cubby holes and stuff. And this is where I decided to be just a little bit extra. Like I said, at first I was going to just stain it and call it a day, but then I thought of a technique that I really wanted to try. Though I'm gonna be honest, it scared the hell out of me because I've never tried it before and this could have ruined the entire project. Basically, I decided I wanted to wrap the entire thing in leather. You know, like an old steamer trunk or something. Once I got the vision in my head, there was just no other way it could happen, man. It is what it is. So in order for this to happen, I laid it down onto some 2-ounce leather, making sure the leather was big enough on all sides so that it can wrap up the sides and actually around that little lip on the top. Happy with the placement, I traced around the box so that I knew where to put the glue. Now for glue on this big area, I decided to use this Gorilla Glue spray, as I read some really good things about it bonding leather to wood. All I had to do was fill in that square that I drew, and add adhesive to the wooden back as well. Then I just position it into place. And this stuff is really cool. Unlike the other contact adhesive, for the first few minutes, it's repositionable. So if I messed up, I could take it apart and put it together again. But then after 10 minutes, it is rock solid. It isn't going anywhere. Okay, so now to actually make this thing wrap around the sides, I needed to cut those corners. So I just took it from the very corner and cut diagonally out, repeating this for every corner. This just gives me this whole flap that I can now wrap up. And because I didn't want to have to deal with any overspray, I decided to use contact adhesive on this, just slathering it all over where I wanted it to stick on the wood, as well as onto the back side of the leather. Then I carefully stretched the leather up as much as it would go and bonded it to the wood, using my fingertips to really work out any air bubbles and make sure everything was nice and straight and tight. Now, by doing it one panel at a time, so I did the ends first and then I'd come back in to do the sides, it makes it so that I could actually cut any of that excess into shape. Basically, all I had to do was use my razor knife and glide it along the wood, cutting the leather as I went. This made the cuts absolutely perfect. It looks like it's made to be there. It's so good. Then once the front and back were done, I did the exact same thing on the sides, cutting them perfectly to shape. I was over the moon with how good these things actually wrapped around and how easy that technique was. To make it even more clean, I just went back into those corners with a wet sponge and then basically slicked them down. And look at how smooth that makes it. It comes together so clean. And look at these things. It's so slick. That was so crazy easy to do. And I'd never tried it before, so I was genuinely afraid. But man, that came out really good. Though I didn't want to just rely on that glue forever. I could foresee it coming undone eventually and unwrapping itself. So I just went back in with these flooring tacks all the way around that rim there just to make sure it never moves. Then I hit the whole outside of the box with my dye. Oh my god, look at how good that's looking. I really love how this is coming out. So much fun. In fact, so much so that I wanted to try another technique. Now I have in my head that it looks like a steamer trunk, so I really wanted to have the corners of it have that extra little bit of leather around them, just like those trunks do to help protect those corners. Took me some workshopping to figure out how to make this, but it's actually really easy. All I did was cut a square of leather 3 inches by 3 inches. Then, using my ruler, I made a diagonal line from one corner to roughly the middle. Then I moved the ruler again and did the same thing in the opposite direction. This gave me a little V shape meeting in the exact center that I was able to cut out with my knife. Now by just folding this piece of leather right down the middle, and then folding those little flaps down, you can see that it forms this perfect little corner cover here. Then I just rounded off all the edges to make sure it was nice and clean. After dyeing these brown as well, I used Tanner's Bond tape all on the inside. This made it so I can easily just stick it onto those corners and have them stay nice and strong. Look at how cool that is. And again, just to add a little extra strength and some more flair to it, I threw in some of these upholstery tacks, which I think just really, they class that up. That looks really cool. I also added one more upholstery tack to the bottom on the opposite side, helping it act as little feet. I had a problem with when we stood it up, those upholstery tacks actually made it lean a little bit, so by adding some to the opposite sides, it makes it work perfectly. And it protects the leather because it lifts it off the ground a little bit. All right, we're getting real close now. To make this thing an actual case that like opens and closes, I just went ahead and added some simple hinges right to the back. I used 3 just to make sure it was nice and strong. And look at this thing, it is a straight up like little steamer trunk. It's so cool. And then once everything's inside of it, oh my God, look at how dope that is. Ah, I love it. Everything has their own little place. They all fit together nice and snug. Oh, it's so cool. It was at this point I came up with like one more little thing I wanted to do. So I took this little wooden panel here and I added this lip to one side of it to stop things from kind of rolling behind like where the cup section is. I added a little leather strip to make it easy to pull out. And this little leg on a hinge here. I think you see where we're going. Here's how it works. So basically it fits really snug into this spot right here, kind of closing it up and protecting all the stuff inside from moving around too much. Then when you're ready, you simply pull the leather tab and bring down your own personal bar. That's right, I told you this thing was a traveling tavern. Now you got your own little bar. You can put your drinks on there. You can play games on it. God, I love this thing so much. And then when you're done, it folds up nice and tight. All right, so now keeping this thing closed is pretty straightforward. I just made some more belts that I secured nice and snug and positioned them where I wanted. Then to help keep them there and to add a little bit to the look, I again used those upholstery tacks all down the sides. Finally, that last detail I forgot was adding the cards to the inside here. And I really like how that kind of pulls this whole thing together. Oh, it looks so good. Now, you may be noticing, there's no handle on this. How are you gonna carry it? And that's a very astute observation. So, I have 2 issues here. One is time. I literally finished putting this thing together like 20 minutes ago. I had enough time to take a shower and then come here and talk to you. And the other thing though is we're gonna return back to what I said earlier. Most of this box is made out of pine. And because the stuff we have in it, like full bottles and whatever, add a lot of weight to it, you can't just kind of screw in handles because they're gonna pull right out of pine. Now I can add like an inner bracket and attach to that so that it distributes that weight a little bit more, but even then, you're pulling against the corners at that point, and still, I just don't trust that it's not gonna pull apart eventually. So my thought is to build almost like another little like cradle or something to attach it to, or another strap that has a handle on the strap. I just didn't have the time to do it right now. So if you have a good suggestion, definitely leave it in the comment section. I'd love to see what you come up with that I haven't thought of yet. But what I did put it on for now was the frame for the backpack of the Wanderer, which it honestly fits in perfectly. I could even add this little barrel to the top. And that 100% fits the vibe of like the traveling tavern owner that I like. Oh, and if you want to see how I made that frame, you can check out this video right here. Now, the only thing I'm missing from my vision was the tavern wench. Sadly, even though I tried, not everything could fit in the box. That poor girl. But spilled milk and all that, look at how cool it is. Look how dope this thing is. Ready? Bring this right down here. Open our little leg up. Put it in its spot. We have a little bar. It's a strong little bar too, look. Put my drink on it. You can grab a game if you want. Some cards here, which just, by the way, they just lift out of this space. You just pull them right out. Oh my God, I love it. I love it just so much. Then once you're done, you put all your stuff away, fold it right back up. You're good to go. Minus, the handles. Still, it's not all that heavy. Now, I hope you like what you saw here today. If you did, why don't you give me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. Also, again, if you have any interest and you want to check out Skillshare, please do. It really does help out the channel. All right, that's all I got here today. Thank you for joining me. Drink responsibly, and as always, keep leveling up, you. Thank you for staying to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that, and it is a fantastic way to support this channel. Another great way is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we couldn't do any of this without them. Special thanks to our newest high-tier Patreon members, Shelby McKinsey, Chris Labrant, and Nathaniel. Again, thank you so much. It's because of you we're able to make fun stuff like a traveling bar. I really do appreciate it. If you'd like what we do here and like to support this channel, consider joining our Patreon. Link in the description below. Otherwise, you can click on one of these videos over here that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that helps us out too. Will you figure out what you want? I'm gonna keep playing with my bar. I